magic to settle an IOU? Is he trying to curse his debtor to death or create counterfeit notes? I might not have a solution to the problem, but I can finish you instead. All sorts of thoughts appeared in Klein's mind as he looked at old Neil with an oddie. He seriously considered the possibility of calling the cops, no of informing them it talks. Old Neil shot a glance at him and said peeved, I can see ignorance, foolishness, and the weak and shameless disbelief in your eyes. Didn't Dunn tell you the maxim of the mystery priors? Do as you wish but do no harm. Although this maxim originated from the secret and evil Moses Ascetic Order organization. Beyonders who choose the path of Moses Ascetic Order have proven that it's right through their own experiences. As long as one strictly abides to it and shows the need of fear and reverence, the risk of losing control will be minimized. The contrary has similarly been established. Your suspicion towards me is an insult to mystery priors. Sorry, Klein did not hesitate to apologize. He had indeed forgotten that Dunn Smith had once mentioned the maxim. Old Neil was not truly angry. In a blink of an eye, he chuckled. A pity, very few Beyonders choose to be seers. There is no corresponding maxim to help you. But I have Emperor Sel's diaries, yes, strictly abiding to the maxim as a hint of acting. Klein suddenly came to this thought as he nodded as if in deep thought. Old Neil did not continue. He removed the vases and other items from the round table and placed them in a corner. Immediately following that, he took out both the crimson red and black candle from the silver chest. He explained, if ordinary people attempt ritualistic magic, they have to follow the results from astromancy or read corresponding manuals. They have to choose suitable dates and times. For example, the day representing the goddess the period when she rules over the moon. But for us Beyonders, especially Beyonders good in this domain, there's no need for that. Our acute spiritual perception and potent astral projections are key. Of course, if you are not confident about the ritualistic magic you are attempting, it's best to choose a suitable date and time. It can increase the probability of success. Alright, this is based on a premise. Remember carefully to abide strictly by the rules. Old Neil placed 2 candles and turned to the side and looked at Klein, saying very solemnly, low sequence Beyonders are not strong enough. Almost all the ritualistic magic they can perform are the seeking of external powers and help. Therefore, you can only consider orthodox divinities like the goddess or the Lord of Storms. Absolutely do not attempt to communicate with the unknown or unpredictable existences. Even if people believe in them, all the promises recorded are filled with enticements. Believe me, don't take any chances. As long as you attempt once, you will go down a slippery slope into the abyss with no return. Any work or resistance will only slow it down with no way to change the trajectory. I remember, Klein said in a deep voice. However, he felt a little afraid. My luck enhancement ritual has apparently sought power from an unknown and unpredictable existence. Furthermore, I have gained powers capable of pulling people into the fog that even a senior Beyonder like the Hanged Man finds unbelievable. Well, at least I think he is a senior Beyonder. Thankfully, I haven't gone mad or have any signs of losing control. While worrying over this, he proactively changed the subject. So, Notork should seek the help of the goddess. No one will stop you if you pray to the Lord of Storms. However, we are unable to tell from our ritualistic magic whether he replies with malicious intent or not. The outcome will be distorted in unpredictable ways. Old Neil successfully made Klein give up the idea in a joking manner. There was no so-called best, only necessary. After his exhortations, Old Neil picked up a crimson red candle and said, by using candles made of moonflowers and dark red sandalwood, it will represent the goddess's identity as Lady of Crimson in the ritualistic magic. He pointed to the black candles and said, candles made of night vanilla and slumber flowers represent the night. As he spoke, he placed the black candle on the top left end of the round table, while the red candle was placed on the top right end. Why do we symbolize the goddess with only 2 candles? She is also the mistress of calm and silence, empress of disaster and horror, and mistress of calm and silence. Old Neil chuckled. That's right. This is something I wished you asked. Before their fall, the Moses Ascetic Order had a very good relationship with the Church. Their beliefs and results on ritualistic magic have heavily influenced us. They believe that all objects are numeric. Every number has a spirituality, and in ritualistic magic, 0 represents the unknown or chaos. It symbolizes the state of the universe before it was born. 1 represents the beginning, the first creator. 2 represents the world and various divinities that were produced from his body. 3 represents contact between divinities and material objects to create all things. Here, using 2 candles represents the goddess, while the 3rd candle is for you. Which 2 candles and which 2 symbols to have depend on the intended effects of ritualistic magic. 3 begets all things, 1 all things stem from 3. Klein could not help but recall certain things from his previous life. Seeing Klein listen attentively, Old Neil took a 3rd candle and said, this is the candle representing me. It's a very ordinary candle, which only has a little bit of mint added. Take note that plants like roses, lemons, mint, moonflower, night vanilla, and slumber flower are beloved and cherished by the goddess. Viewing it from another angle, the 3 candles represent the bodies, spiritualities and godhood of every person. After finishing the description, Old Neil placed the 3rd candle in the middle of the round table. He then took out a bottle of concocted full moon essence oil, a huge cauldron engraved with the dark sacred emblem, a silver knife with gorgeous patterns, a cup of water, and a saucer of coarse salt. To Beyonders who are not good at ritualistic magic, there is a need for bells, crystal balls, silver cups, incense or other supplementary items. However, mystery priors and seers have no need for that. These artifacts are already sufficient. Old Neil placed the fake goatskin parchment with the IOU just below the cauldron and used a special quill to hold down one corner. He turned to Klein and said, "Ritualistic magic needs a clean spiritual environment where you will not be disturbed. And that requires us to create it. The steps are to first enter cogitation. Focus your mind and with the supplementary items, draw out our strength and construct it around us. For example, Ray Beaver's house had used Holy Night powder while I'll be using a ritual silver dagger. Throughout the entire process, we have to go according to the outcome we desire to confirm the symbolism and corresponding incantation. Incantations are best done in Hermes because ancient Hermes stemmed from nature. It's akin to ancient Dragonish and ancient Elvish. The effects are very direct, lacking the necessary concealment and protection. It easily causes the caster to fall into danger. This is also why it has been modified. However, it's more effective. Alright, I have to focus on the ritualistic magic. I won't explain things to you any further. Pay attention by watching and listening. Remember any problems and ask me when everything is done. Alright, Klein took 2 steps back and trained his eyes on Old Neil. Old Neil's eyes rapidly darkened as invisible wind around him spun. He was silent for a moment, going from left to right, then up to down, using his psyche to cause friction and consecutively light up the 3 candles. Following that, he picked up the silver knife and stabbed it into the coarse salt. Then, he chanted in Hermes. I sanctify you, blade of pure silver. I cleanse and purify you, allowing you to serve me in this ritual. In the name of the Evernight Goddess, the Lady of Crimson. You have been sanctified. After a short but powerful syllable, Old Neil drew a silver knife and inserted it into a cup of clear water. Then, he raised it and pointed to the space beyond the round table. He aimed the blade tip in the periphery and took a step forward, circling the round table. Every step he took made Klein feel an invisible energy spew out of the silver knife. It was filled with spirituality as it connected with the air, forming a completely sealed wall. After walking 1 round, the altar was completely isolated from its surroundings. Old Neil stood in front of the round table and put the silver knife down. He picked up the bottle of full moon essence oil and dripped 3 drops on the black, dark red, and ordinary candles. Sizzle. A thin mist emanated as everything seemed to become veiled in mystery. Old Neil put down the glass bottle and looked at the fake goatskin parchment silently for 2 minutes. Then, he picked up the quill and drew a mark he controlled a square that framed all the content, indicating that he was in control of the debt. Following that, he drew another cross, indicating that it was cancelled. Upon reaching this step, he picked up the parchment with one hand and tapped his glabella with the other to activate his spirit vision. Another invisible and exuberant energy bloomed as Old Neil whispered a chant. I pray for the power of the Dark Night. I pray for the power of the Crimson. I pray for the Goddess's loving grace. Please provide me with the funds to pay this IOU. Night Vanilla, an herb that belongs to the Red Moon, please bestow your powers to my incantation. Moonflower, an herb that belongs to the Red Moon, please bestow your powers to my incantation. Klein was completely flabbergasted listening from the side. All sorts of thoughts aroused in him. Such an incantation can work? Although it was recited from written Hermes. Isn't this way too simple and down to earth? Wouldn't the goddess be angry and multiply the debt severalfold? At that moment, the candle light lit up suddenly. After Old Neil finished his incantation, he closed his eyes for 2 minutes. He picked up the full moon essence oil and dripped 1 drop onto each of the 3 candles. Immediately following that, he grabbed the parchment and pulled it close to the candle representing me. When it ignited, he immediately threw it into the cauldron. Old Neil closed his eyes again as he seemed to sense the burning of the IOU. He opened his eyes after a moment and looked toward the black sacred emblem on the cauldron. The parchment was already completely incinerated. Praise the Lady. Old Neil tapped his chest in 4 spots, forming the shape of the crimson moon. Then, he extinguished the candles in the opposite order as he lit them. After finishing everything, he used the silver knife to rip apart the invisible wall around him. A huge wind stirred immediately as Old Neil heaved a sigh of relief. It's done. That's it, Klein asked in a daze. Has the IOU been settled? How? I don't know either. Anyways, it will be settled in a reasonable manner, said Old Neil with a smile as he threw up his hands. This Klein was unsure what expression or words to use as a response. Isn't this a little unreliable? This is a Taoism saying, Tao begets 1, 1 begets 2, 2 begets 3, 3 begets all things. Stop thinking about the bloody IOU. Let's discuss the ritualistic magic. Old Neil put away the candles, cauldron, silver knife, and other items with a relaxed expression. Klein really wanted to shrug his shoulders like the Americans in his previous life, but ultimately could not bring himself to do something that ungentlemanly. He turned his focus toward the ritualistic magic and threw out detailed questions that puzzled him, receiving answers from them. For example, the incantations had a particular format. As long as they were satisfied and the key meaning was expressed in Hermes, the rest could be left to one's creativity. Of course, blasphemy or disrespectful descriptions were absolutely forbidden. The mysticism class lasted until noon before Old Neil coughed twice. We have to return to Jartland Street. With that said, he grumbled in an indistinct manner, to get these bloody materials, I missed my beloved breakfast. Klein looked around both amused and puzzled. Mr. Neil, do you have a chef? Or a maid-servant in charge of cooking? A weekly salary of £12 could hire several servants. According to the newspapers, with board and lodging provided, hiring an ordinary chef cost anywhere between 12 to 15 soldi a week. It did not even need £1. A maid-servant to do miscellaneous chores was even cheaper. Their weekly salaries ranged between 3 soldi 6 pence to 6 soldi. Of course, one could not bear any hope of them having any culinary skills. Ah, that's not right. With Mr. Neal's debt of £30, it's only normal he doesn't hire any chefs or servants. It seems I've asked another question I should not have asked. While Klein regretted his question, old Neal shook his head without minding it. I often attempt ritualistic magic, research extraordinary items, and read corresponding documents at home, so I don't nor is it possible that I hire ordinary people as chefs. Butlers or maidservants. I only hire someone to clean up the place regularly. And if they are not ordinary people, do you think they will be willing to do such jobs? I seem to have asked a silly question. It's possibly because I will not do anything that involves mysticism at home, explained Klein in a self-deprecating manner. Old Neal had long stood up, wore his round felt hat, and while walking out the door, rambled on. I seem to smell pan-fried foie gras once the IOU is completely settled. I'll definitely have one set. For lunch, I'll definitely eat roasted pork glazed with apple juices. No, that's not enough. I must have a sausage infused with mashed potatoes. You are making me hungry. Klein swallowed his saliva as he caught up to old Neal and headed for the nearby public carriage stop. After returning to Jartland Street, old Neal suddenly grunted after stepping down the carriage. What do I see? Goddess, what am I seeing? He was suddenly as nimble as a 17 or 18-year-old lad. He quickly came to the roadside and picked up an item. Klein leaned close out of curiosity and looked carefully. He realized it was a wallet with fine workmanship. With his lack of experience, he could barely tell if the dark brown wallet was made of buffalo skin or sheepskin. But he noticed a small light blue logo embroidered on the side of the wallet, a white dove spreading its wings as if ready to take off. That was Klein's first impression. The second thing he noticed was the stack of paper notes in the bulging wallet. There were more than 20 grey notes imprinted with black ink gold pounds. Old Neal opened up the wallet and pulled out the notes. When he looked at it carefully, he immediately chuckled. £10 notes. The Honourable Founder and Protector, William I. Wow, goddess, there's a total of 30 notes. There's also a few £5 notes, £1 and 5 solid notes. More than £300? That's a huge amount of money in every meaning of the word. I might not even earn that much in 10 years. Klein's breathing turned heavy involuntarily. As the amount of gold pounds was immense, picking up such a wallet was equivalent to picking up a briefcase of banknotes in his previous life. I wonder which gentleman dropped it. He can't be someone ordinary, analysed Klein calmly. Such a wallet was clearly not a woman's. There's no need to care who he is, said old Neal with a chuckle. It's not like we attempted to divine and take money that doesn't belong to us. We should wait here for a moment. I believe the gentleman will soon be back searching for it. It's not something that can be given up no matter who it is. Klein heaved a sigh of relief. He had a brand new understanding of old Neal's morals. He was rather worried that he would have used the goddess's bestowment as an excuse and paid off his debt. He was still wondering how to prevent it and persuade him otherwise. Business, do as you wish, but do no harm. Klein suddenly learned something new. The duo did not wait more than a minute by the streets when a luxurious four-wheeled carriage zoomed over. Its side had a light blue logo with a dove spreading its wings. The carriage stopped, and a middle-aged man dressed in a black formal suit with a bow tie of the same colour alighted. He looked at the wallet, took off his hat, and said politely, "Sirs, that should be my master's wallet. Your logo is proof of everything, but I need to make additional verifications. This is to be responsible for all parties." "Might I ask how much money is there in the wallet?" replied old Neal politely. The middle-aged man was taken aback as he said in a self-deprecating manner almost immediately, "As a butler, I do not know how much money master had in his wallet. Sorry, please permit me to ask." "As you wish." Old Neal gestured for him to do as he pleased. The middle-aged man walked to the carriage's side and through the window, conversed with the person within. He approached Klein and old Neal again and smiled. "More than £300, but less than £350. My master does not remember the exact number. Does not remember that. Really some filthy rich guy. If I had that much money on me, I would definitely be counting it again," and again Klein was filled with envy. Old Neal nodded and handed the wallet back. "With the goddess as proof, this belongs to you." The middle-aged man took the wallet over and did an estimate before pulling out 3 £10 notes. "My master is Sir de Wayville. He wishes to commend your morals. This is what an honest person should receive. Please do not reject it. Sir de Wayville, the one who established the de Wayville Trust. The Sir de Wayville who provided cheap rental apartments to the working class." Klein immediately remembered the name. He was a knight that his brother respected but did not believe was grounded in reality. "Thank you, Sir de Wayville. He is a kind and generous gentleman." Old Neal did not stand on ceremony as he received the 3 notes. After watching Sir de Wayville's carriage depart, he turned to look at Klein when he saw that there was no one around. He flicked the notes and chuckled. £30. The IOU is settled. I said it will be settled in a reasonable manner. This is the power of magic. Holy F *** king power of magic. That actually works. Klein was once again flabbergasted. A few minutes later, he entered the building stairwell and while heading to the security company, he asked puzzledly, "Mr. Neal, why didn't you ask for more money?" Do not be greedy. One must take care not to be greedy when doing ritualistic magic. Temperance is a critical trait needed by every mystery prior if they wish to live long, explained old Neal happily. In a huge ballroom, candles were burning on a few chandeliers, emitting a fragrance that soothed the minds of people. By the sheer number of candles, they produced a light in no way inferior to that of gas lamps. There were long tables with pan-fried foie gras, grilled steak, roasted chicken, fried tonguefish, dessert oysters, mustard stew, cream soup, and other delicacies. In addition, there were bottles of mist champagne, Ormia grape wine, and Southville red wine. They were all glistening with a tempting glow under the light. Servants in red vests carried trays with crystal cups and shuttled between the gentlemen and ladies dressed both elegantly or gorgeously. Audrey Hall was wearing a collared, high-waisted, pale white dress with engagements. Her corset was tightly fitted, while her voluminous layers were puffed up perfectly with a caged crinoline. Her long blonde hair was coiled up in an elegant bun, and the earrings, necklace, and rings she wore sparkled brightly. At her feet were a pair of white dancing shoes that were stitched with roses and diamonds. How many petticoats am I even wearing? 5, 6. Wearing white silk gloves, Audrey caressed her crinoline gently with her right hand. Her left hand was holding a glass of clear champagne. Audrey was nothing like her usual self, usually placing herself center stage of banquets and making her the focus of attention. Instead, she avoided the bustle and quietly stood in the shadows of hanging curtains by the French windows. She took a sip of champagne as she watched the crowd as though she did not belong. Count Wolf's youngest son is chatting with Viscount Conrade's daughter. He likes to move his forearm to reinforce what he says. The bigger the movement of his forearm, the more unbelievable his words. That is something gleaned from experience. He can't stop trying to elevate himself by putting other people down. However, he can't help but feel guilty. It can be seen by the way he talks and his body language. Duchess Della has repeatedly covered her mouth while laughing with her left hand today. Ah, I see. She is showing off her pure ocean blue sapphire. Her husband, Duke McGann, is discussing the current situation with a few conservative nobles. Since the banquet began, he has searched for Duchess Della once. They almost never make eye contact. Maybe they aren't as in love as they pretend to be. Baron Larry has made Madame Parnes laugh 7 times. That's very normal, nothing strange about it, but why does she look at her husband with guilty eyes? Oh, they have gone their separate ways. It's not right. The directions they are headed leads to the garden. In the extravagant banquet, Audrey saw many details she never noticed in the past. There was an instant where she nearly believed that she was watching an opera. Everyone is a good opera actor, she sighed silently as her eyes remained limpid. At that moment, she suddenly sensed something and turned her head. She cast her gaze onto a dark corner in the large balcony outside. In the shadows was a huge golden retriever sitting there silently. She was looking inside at Audrey, while half her body was hidden in the darkness. Susie, the corners of Audrey's mouth twitched as her expression instantly changed. She could no longer maintain her state as a spectator. An ancient 3-masted sailboat was navigating through a tumultuous storm in the sea. It was not fast and its displacement was lacking. With the weather and the sea looking like a cataclysmic scene, the sailboat was like a withered leaf separated from its tree. However, regardless of how the typhoons rampaged or how terrifying the waves were, it continued sailing peacefully without any signs of tilting. Alger Wilson stood on the empty deck as he looked at the massive waves that resembled mountains. His thoughts were a mystery. It's going to be Monday again, he muttered silently to himself. It was the day belonging to Mother Earth, the beginning of a series of waxing and waning. However, it meant something different to Alger. It belonged to a mysterious existence forever enveloped in greyish-white fog. At least I haven't been reduced to a madman. He stopped looking around as he gave a self-deprecating chuckle. At this moment, one of the only few sailors he had leaned over and asked reverently, "Your Grace, where are we setting course for this time?" Alger surveyed his surroundings and said in calm voice, "Pursue the listener from the Aurora Order." The storm subsided as mist emanated. On a strange sailboat with cannons on board, an 8 or 9-year-old boy with soft yellow hair was looking at pirates around him in fear. They were disorderly, some enjoyed barrels of beer, some swung around with ropes, others mocked each other, and some even fought with their fists. He turned to look at a black-robed man standing in the shadows. He suppressed his voice and asked, "Father, where are we going?" 5 days ago was his first time seeing his father, a father who proclaimed to be an adventurer. If not for the oil painting his late mother left him that confirmed his father's identity and the fact that the orphanage had opened its doors to him, he was absolutely unwilling to leave his hometown and follow his only kin who was also nearly a stranger. The man in the shadows lowered his head and looked at his son. With an amiable expression, he answered, "Jack, I'm bringing you to a holy place, a holy residence where the Creator once lived." Is that the kingdom of God? We mortals can only enter by winning his grace. Jack had been well educated by his mother and knew this much. He was both surprised and fearful about the matter. Standing in the shadows, the man had an unforgettable jawline as though he was a sculpture chiseled by the best artisan. He placed his hand to his ear and made a listening pose. He replied in a tone that sounded like sleep talking, "Jack, mortals are a wrong concept. The Creator created this world and he is everywhere. He exists in every living being. Therefore, all beings have God. Once the godhood attains a particular level, they can become an angel. The 7 Fey gods at present are only powerful angels. Look, I can now hear the teachings of the Creator. Ah, how extraordinary is this revelation. Life is only a tour of the spirit. When the spirit is sufficiently potent and resilient, we can find our godhood infused with even more gods." Jack could not understand the complicated description. He shook his head and asked another question he previously did not have the chance to. "Father, I heard from Mother that after the Creator created this world, he split into all beings and does not exist in actuality. Then, why does his holy residence exist?" As a 7 to 8-year-old child, he was logical. The man with the chiseled face was taken aback. He turned his head away as though he was listening to more murmurings. Suddenly, he slumped down, knees on the deck. His exposed skin protruded black shards. He clenched his head with both hands as his expression warped, and he shouted in extreme pain, "They are lying." After lunch, having had old Neil promise him that he would bring him to the underground market the next time he went, Klein slowly returned to the Blackthorn Security Company. He chose the two options of reading the documents in the staff office and practicing his abilities, or take the opportunity to go out and act as a seer in the divination club before Captain Dunn stopped him. However, before he could make the decision, he saw Dunn Smith walk in. He was dressed in the usual black windbreaker and halved top hat. "Captain, any updates?" Klein thought of the whereabouts of the Antigonus family's notebook as he asked with concern. Without showing any signs of fatigue in his grey eyes, Dunn said, "The facts have corroborated that the Antigonus family's notebook is in Ray Bieber's hands. However, he has vanished completely. I have already informed the various network teams of this matter through a telegram. They were requested to pay attention to the various piers and steam locomotive stations. The first batch of printed portraits was mailed out yesterday afternoon and will be printed in various major newspapers. How nice it would be if there were phones, fax machines, surveillance cameras, and big data. What a pity. I know how to use all of them and even understand a little of the logic behind it." Klein exhaled silently. "But regardless, we can consider ourselves as having found the notebook. And this is all thanks to you. Of course, it still needs another round of confirmations. I have already sent a telegram to the Backland Diocese, requesting them to escort sealed artifact 2-049 here. It was once a dangerous item of the Antigonus family. It can help us know if Ray Bieber is a descendant of the Antigonus family. A grade 2 sealed artifact, dangerous. They can be used with care and moderation." Klein had originally wanted to ask about the sealed artifact, its special abilities, and the danger it posed out of curiosity, but he instantly recalled that he lacked the necessary clearance. He had no choice but to give up. "May God bless us." Klein tapped 4 spots on his chest, forming the sign of the full moon. Dunn pushed open the door to his office and said with a slight nod, "The goddess has always been protecting us. Klein, if you had not chosen seer, you would be a formal member after this matter is verified. You could have chosen sleepless, but pity to be frank, I'm still puzzled over your choice. Although Corpse Collector is quite off-putting, you have seen Dali as well. You should know that spirit mediums vary in strength. As for Mystery Prize, they're a good choice too. At the very least, you have old Neil as a role model, so he will make sure the risk of losing control is minimized." With regards to this question, Klein had prepared an answer from the beginning. He just never had a chance to use it since Dunn did not ask. He was only able to answer in passing. He organized his words and said, "My considerations stem from the fact that seers and Mystery Prize are considered beyonders with a support role. They do not need to always face enemies, for that's too dangerous. And both you and old Neil said that in the domain of mystery and beyonders, curiosity and experimentation usually brings about terrifying outcomes. Describing Mystery Prize as trying mysteries made me worried, so hey, as you know, I was only an ordinary graduate not long ago. A lack of guts is the only reason I made such a choice. I have to say that this is a very reasonable answer that goes beyond my expectations." Dunn massaged his temples and chuckled. He turned halfway as his grey eyes sized up Klein. "Continue going out for now. Do not limit yourself to the paths leading from Welsh's Place to Iron Cross Street. Perhaps you might sense the notebook and help us confirm Ray Bieber's location." All right. Klein realized that he no longer needed to be in a dilemma. He bade Dunn farewell and turned around, his heart beginning to count. 3, 2, hold on, shouted Dunn. Klein turned his head and smiled. "Captain, is there anything else?" Dunn coughed slightly and said, "Well, support beyonders have to fight their enemies from time to time. Although seers sound like they can avoid such battles, they are not to be ignored. You have to maintain your shooting skills and work on increasing your strength. This is what I'm working hard towards." Klein pointed outside. "I'll be leaving." "All right. Wait a moment." Dunn shouted for him once more. As he pondered, he said, "Perhaps I have to consider hiring a combat trainer for you. Of course, this matter is under the premise that you become a formal member." Klein responded tersely before asking carefully, "Captain, is there anything else?" "No." Seeing Klein's unbelieving eyes, Dunn shook his head and smiled. He emphasized again, "Really, nothing." Only then did Klein walk past the partition divider. He bade farewell to Roseanne and Mrs. Oriana and headed to the shooting club for practice. With all of this done, he went to the divination club and saw the beautiful Angelica standing there reading newspapers leisurely. "Home," Klein silently read. With the cane in hand, he walked over and greeted with a smile. "Good afternoon, Madam Angelica." "Good afternoon, Mr. Meritti." In no rush, Angelica put down her magazine. She stood up and said, "Not long after you left yesterday, Mr. Glacis came. He just recovered from a major illness." Klein heaved a sigh of relief as he smiled. "That sure is something worth celebrating." Upon hearing this, Angelica, who was secretly observing him, lowered her voice and asked out of curiosity, "Mr. Glacis said that you are a very, very, very magical doctor. Are you?" "What?" Klein looked at the lady in front of him, suspecting if he was hearing things. What made him think I'm a doctor? Even I do not know. Upon seeing Klein's odd expression, Angelica immediately felt her beliefs waver. "Is that so? Mr. Glacis mentioned that you were able to tell of an ailment in his lungs simply from observation." Her voice softened until she finally shut up. "Observation? A dark labella?" Klein was instantly enlightened as he shook his head with a chortle. "I believe Mr. Glacis was mistaken. He was planning on being perfunctory, but after recalling that no one sought his divination services the entire afternoon yesterday, his mind whirled. It affected his goal of acting as a seer, so he explained, "It's actually a form of divination." "Divination? But Mr. Glasses only mentioned that you observed his face." "That's also considered divination?" asked Angelica in shock and doubt. Klein smiled, composed. "As a member of the divination club, you should know about palm reading, right?" Palm reading was not patented by the Foodaholic Empire. Even on Earth, India and old Europe had developed similar principles, much less in a world with beyond their powers. "I know about it, but it seems you did not read his palm." "Were you observing him in secret?" asked Angelica curiously. "I was using face reading." Klein cooked up a lie. "Its principles are very different from palm reading at a fundamental level." "Really?" Angelica's eyes were filled with disbelief. In order to develop his career as a seer, Klein chuckled. He pretended to be in thought as he tapped his glabella twice. He focused his eyes and Angelica's aura presented itself. Her head was purple, her limbs were red, her throat was blue. There was no problems with her health except for some colors being duller. However, that was a manifestation of ordinary fatigue. Klein then looked at her emotions. She saw orange mixed in with some red and blue. It also meant warmth coupled with some excitement and thought. Thankfully, after realizing that there was nothing abnormal about her, Klein planned on deactivating his spirit vision. But it was at that moment when he suddenly saw rich darkness hidden in the depths of her emotional colors. Furthermore, she is lacking a little of white and eagerness to improve. Klein nodded while in thought. "Mr. Moritti, were you reading my face?" Seeing the young gentleman in black in front of her turn silent abruptly while seriously sizing her up, Angelica keenly noticed something. She asked in a half-curious and half-worried manner. Klein did not immediately reply. Instead, he tapped his glabella lightly as he wore a look of scrutiny. Just as Angelica was feeling unease, he said warmly, "Madam Angelica, there are some sorrows and pains which you should not seal in your heart." Angelica's eyes widened as her mouth turned agape. However, she did not say a word. She looked at Klein in his half-top hat with an apparent scholarly bearing. He heard him use a deep, comforting and warm voice to say, "You need to either go mountain climbing, a game of tennis, or perform a tragic play to exhaust your body due to exercising. Let your tears flow down uninhibited, then cry and scream. Express all those emotions. That will be very helpful to your health." The moment those words entered her ears, Angelica felt like she had transformed into a statue. She stood there motionless. She tried hard to blink as she lowered her head in a fluster, saying deeply, "Thank you for your suggestion." "It seems like there are many members here today," Klein did not continue. As though he had not done any divinations prior, he turned to his side and looked to the meeting room at the end of the corridor. "Sunday afternoon, at least 50 members." Angelica's voice sounded a little hoarse. She only mentioned the key terms. She paused as her vocal pace gradually returned to normal. "Do you want tea or coffee?" "Side black tea." Klein nodded slightly. He politely took off his hat and slowly walked to the meeting room. Only when he vanished behind the door did Angelica exhale slowly. The Divination Club's meeting room was very large. It was nearly twice the size of Klein's high school classroom. In the past, only 5 or 6 members would be present, making it look extremely empty. Now, there were dozens of fortune tellers sitting in different spots. They filled up most of the room. Sunlight shone into the room through the few oriel windows. The members were either discussing softly among themselves or asking Harness Vincent questions. Otherwise, they were practicing and attempting divination or drinking coffee and reading newspapers by themselves. Such a scene made Klein feel like he was back to his schooling days on Earth. The difference was that it was noisier and more rowdy back then, without the tranquility of the meeting room. He looked around, but he didn't see familiar faces like Glasses or Edward Steve. So, he casually picked up a divination textbook, found a corner, and started flipping through it leisurely. Very soon, Angelica came in with a cup of tea and left it on the table before Klein. As she was leaving quietly, she suddenly saw Mr. Moritti take out an exquisite-looking silver chain from his left sleeve. There was a chunk of pure topaz hanging on the silver chain. What is he doing? Angelica slowed down subconsciously and focused her gaze at Klein. Klein held the silver chain with his left hand and allowed the topaz to hang above the side black tea, just short of touching the surface of the liquid. With a serene expression, he half closed his eyes and the atmosphere around him suddenly turned quiet. The topaz started moving slightly, along with the special-looking silver chain, in a clockwise direction. Upon seeing this, Angelica found Mr. Moritti extremely mysterious. "The black tea you provide is great," Klein said softly after he opened his eyes with a smile. His actions were intentionally done for Angelica to see. If he wanted people to select him for his divination services, Angelica's recommendation was a very crucial factor. Since he wanted to act as a seer, Klein no longer had any reservations. He completely personified the identity. "Yes, Mr. Vanners is very picky about the quality of tea," Angelica said, stunned. Klein put away his spirit pendulum by winding it properly. Then, he raised a white porcelain cup with floral design. With a smile, he gestured politely at her with his cup. Angelica returned to the reception hall, but she no longer had the mood to read magazines. She sat there, gazing into the distance. It was a wonder what she was thinking about. This continued until there were knocks on the door. She jolted awake and hurriedly looked at the entrance, only to see a lady dressed in a light blue dress. The lady took off her veiled hat with a powder blue ribbon. She looked calm and melancholic. "Good afternoon, esteemed lady." Would you like to join the divination club, or are you looking for a divination? Angelica asked like clockwork. I want a divination. The lady had a beautiful pair of eyes hidden with sorrow, and she bit her lower lip as she spoke. Angelica guided her to the sofa and explained to her how the divination club worked in detail. She picked up an album and handed it over. You can pick anyone. In her low spirits, the lady flipped through the album seriously. As there were too many club members there that day, there were too many choices. It left her quite upset. Can you recommend one? From these few pages, she pointed at the middle section of the album, omitting the fortune tellers priced above 2 soldi and those below 4 pence. Angelica took the album and looked at it for a few minutes. She deliberated her words before saying, I suggest this gentleman. The lady, who looked uneasy, took a glance and realized that it was a fortune teller named Klein Moretti. Mr. Moretti just joined the club. Is his divination reliable? She asked worriedly. Angelica nodded with great affirmation. Another member of the club and I are certain that Mr. Moretti is an outstanding fortune teller. If it wasn't for his just joining the club, he wouldn't take such low fees. I understand. The depressed girl nodded. I'll pick Mr. Moretti for a divination then. All right, please hold on for a second. Angelica took the album and walked towards the meeting room. She came next to Klein and said with a suppressed voice, Mr. Moretti, someone wants you to divine for them. Which room would you like to use? That was effective. My first business is here. Klein put down his teacup and nodded calmly as he said, Topaz room. All right. Angelica walked slowly ahead of him and led him to Topaz room before opening its wooden door. Klein sat behind the table that had various divination tools on it. He waited less than a minute before he saw a woman in a light blue dress walk in. She looked down and melancholic. Seizing the opportunity when she was closing the door, he tapped his glabella twice. The yellow color in her stomach seems a little dull. The dark color of her emotions is very heavy, mainly worry and anxiety. Klein looked her over carefully and leaned backwards. He then lifted his hand to cut off his spiritual vision. Good day, Mr. Moretti. The woman in the light blue dress sat down. Good afternoon, how may I address you? Klein asked politely, not carrying much hope of getting an answer. As a keyboard warrior, he knew that many people were not willing to use their real names during divination. You can call me Anna. The girl put her veiled cap aside. She looked at Klein with mixed anticipation and doubt, and said, I would like to divine about my fiancé's situation. He traveled to the southern continent in March for a business deal. He sent me and his family a telegram last month on the 3rd, saying that he was going to set sail and return. But he did not return after 20 days. At first, I believed that his delay was due to the Berserk Ocean's weather, but as of today, it has been more than a month. The ship he took, the Alfalfa, still hasn't arrived at Enmat Harbor. The ocean that separated the northern and southern continent was called the Berserk Ocean. It was well known for natural calamities and its countless dangerous currents. If it was not for Emperor Russell, who sent men to discover a few safer sailing routes, countries in the northern continent would still have yet to enter the age of colonization, let alone lay an underwater cable to complete a transoceanic telegraph. Klein looked at his very first client of his career as a seer and asked carefully, which divination method do you wish to use? Anne, with her beautiful eyes, hesitated for more than 10 seconds. You can choose any type that you believe will be accurate. You are the fortune teller, while I'm not. Of course, apart from cards, including tarot, I have also attempted studying them at home. I always felt they were more like toys or a game. Klein thought for a moment, his wrists leaning on the edge of the table. He steepled his hands before his face, his gaze peaceful. He said softly, then we shall use the astrolabe. He pointed to a fountain pen and stack of white paper on the table and said, write down the name of your fiancé as well as his facial features, address, and date of birth. It would be even better if you can remember the specific time he was born. From her clothes, makeup, and demeanor, Klein did not believe that she was illiterate. Anna did not reply. She extended her hand and took a piece of paper. She lifted the pen and dipped it in some ink. She started writing, pausing occasionally to think. 2 minutes later, she pushed the paper toward Klein. Klein received it and turned it around. The information on the paper read, Joyce Meyer, the 15th of September 1323, 2 p.m. Tingen City, East Borough, 8 Stephens Street. Short blonde hair, aquiline nose. With just a short glance, Klein quickly calculated the person's spiritual number. 1 plus 5 equals 6. In the study of spirit numerology and mysticism, adding the numbers of the day the person was born was called their birthday path number, affecting the person's life before 27. Birth month path number, calculated by adding the numbers in their birth month, affected their life from 27 to 54 years old. While the birth year path number, calculating the numbers in their birth year, affected their life from 54 years old onward. It was July 1349, so Joyce was not yet 27. Thus, Klein immediately calculated the birthday path number. The number 6 represented a balanced and harmonious life, with a heart for giving and a decent marriage or engagement. Following this, he quickly calculated Joyce's year path number. The so-called year path number was calculated by replacing the birth year with the current year. The digits were then added with his birthday path number and birth month path number to get a general understanding of the person's luck for the year. 1 plus 3 plus 4 plus 9 equals 17, 1 plus 7 equals 8, 8 plus 9, birth month path number, plus 6, birthday path number, equals 23, 2 plus 3 equals 5, his year path number is 5, signifying that he would meet with change and accident. He would be required to take certain risks. Klein made a silent judgment after consolidating the facts. He confirmed that the information Anna gave was correct. He retracted his gaze from the paper and turned it toward Anna. Mr. Meyer set off on his journey on the 3rd of June. If he did not lie, that is indeed the case. Anna bit her lips. All right. Klein took the fountain pen and made a note of that. He looked at Anna with his dark brown eyes and said gently, I will begin creating the astrolab now. I will need some time and absolute silence. Do you mind waiting outside? Angelica will provide you with a cup of tea or coffee. All right. Anna knew that some fortune tellers had their eccentricities, so she stood up unsurprised. She took her hat with the light blue ribbon and left the topaz room. Klein locked the door and returned to the table. He followed the information and set up the astrolab, including elements such as his horoscope and locations of the corresponding planets and stars. Throughout the entire process, he did not open the astromancy manual. He completed the setup based on his memory. Over the past few days of his mysticism studies, Klein realized that he could easily grasp and understand anything about divination, quickly turning it into instinct. Perhaps that as the ability of a seer he completed the astrolab and felt satisfied. He felt as though his body, heart, and soul had relaxed considerably. As he looked at the outcome, he followed the path of the horoscopes and planets, as well as other supporting details to roughly deduce that Joyce Meyer had met with an accident but would ultimately survive it. At this point, the divination was technically complete. But Klein wanted to pay much attention to his first business transaction. He hoped to build a reputation to aid in acquiring future jobs. He picked up a pen and wrote a sentence in Hermes, Joyce Meyer's current situation. He read the sentence silently and memorized the information on the piece of paper, repeating it again and again. After 7 times, Klein grabbed the piece of paper and leaned back into his chair. He imagined the sphere of light, and his eyes became darker, allowing him to quickly enter a state of cogitation. The surroundings took on an ethereal quality. A formless, boundless fog stretched above him. Klein recalled the contents of the piece of paper, then relaxed. He fell into a deep sleep in this state. He was using a dream divination technique. Repeating the question, remembering the details, and then allowing his astral projection to roam the spirit world in a dream would allow him to gain revelations. Ordinary people also had this sort of experience sometimes, but it was hard for them to recall, as the signs in their dreams were more complicated and garbled. A seer would not have such a problem, for they could see the images directly. The surroundings began to turn hazy as Klein turned half asleep. In the contorted fantasy, he saw a blond young man with an aquiline nose. He was swimming frantically in a sea of blood, nearly engulfed by the waves. But in the end, he managed to escape the shore. The image shattered and changed. Klein saw a blue house with a toy windmill at the door. That blond young man was entering the house slowly, seemingly in joy. At this moment, the image changed once again. Klein realized that he was inside a magnificent palace. The walls were destroyed and damaged beyond repair. Moss and weeds grew in multiple areas. Through the holes in the walls, he could see a mountain peak and clouds clinging close to it outside. Atop the palace was a huge throne carved out of stone. It was adorned with dull gemstones and gold. It looked as though it was not prepared for a human. This giant throne was empty and mottled, as if it had been washed over by the ages. Klein looked around in confusion. He did not understand why he would be dreaming of such a scene. His turbid mind turned sharp as he subconsciously walked out of the palace in an attempt to ascertain where he was. Suddenly, he felt a gaze fall upon him. It was a gaze that came from behind. Klein suddenly turned around and stared towards the giant stone throne, only to see a scene of countless transparent maggots slowly twitching and growing. Klein gasped. He opened his eyes and woke up from his dream. Crystal balls, tarot cards, and the prepared astrolab entered his vision. Reality quickly replaced fantasy. The initial dream was the result of the divination, but what was the later dream about? It seemed to be targeted at me. Klein put the piece of paper down. He rubbed his temples and contemplated. He could confirm that it wasn't his fear projecting itself in the form of a dream, for he was doing the divination himself. A palace not meant for humans on the peak of a mountain, the silent stare, the contorted and weird scene of the maggots Klein silently guessed as he recalled. Has the luck enhancement ritual communicated with that existence? Or is it a result of the Antigonus family's notebook, right? That notebook mentioned the nation of the Evernight in the Hornus Ice Mountain range. The palace in the dream was on a mountain peak. He made a simple deduction and was relieved that he had picked seer. According to old Neil, mystery priors could also divine through dreams, but they weren't as effective as a seer. Sigh, it sure isn't letting me go. All I can hope for is the early capture of Ray B. But Klein collected himself and picked up a piece of paper with the diagram of the astrolab. He slowly walked towards the door. He opened the door and headed to the reception area. He saw Anna looking out the window, completely ignoring her cup of black tea. Ah, Mr. Moritti, is there a result? She saw Klein in her peripheral vision and stood up in a hurry. Klein did not answer her immediately. Instead, he asked according to the revelation he received from the dream, does your house, or Mr. Meyer's house, have a toy windmill? Anna's eyes widened, shocked into silence. After a while, she muttered, that was a present he gave me. It is by the door of my house. How did you know that? See, can this be divined? Klein smiled and spoke with a gentle tone. Congratulations, Miss Anne. Mr. Joyce Meyer is currently a guest at your place. If you rush back, you should still be able to meet him. He just experienced a calamity, an unimaginably painful journey. What he needs now are not questions, but consolation and a warm hug. Really, Anna asked in disbelief. The fortune tellers she knew would never speak with such certainty or give such firm conclusions. You will know if you go back immediately, Klein replied with a gentle tone and smile. Oh, Lord of Steam, is that true? Has my poor Joyce returned? Are you certain? No, I cannot believe it. Anna froze for a moment and said a few delirious words. She took out a one-sodding note from her purse and did not wait for Klein to give her the change. She broke into a small jog as she left the divination club, taking a carriage back home. Does this include my tip? Klein looked at the note and shook his head with a laugh. A two-wheeled carriage steered quickly across the streets and entered East Borough. Anna watched the streets sweeping past her, feeling a mixture of unease, anticipation, and fear. It did not take long before the toy windmill entered her field of vision. She got off the carriage, showing no care for her bearing. She staggered quickly towards the door and rang the doorbell. The door creaked open, revealing a blond young man dressed in a black formal suit. He was haggard, but his eyes carried a glint of joy. He had an aquiline nose. I thought that I would miss you today, Joyce said with a smile. Oh, exalted steam, you really are back, Anna rubbed her eyes, exclaiming in pleasant surprise. What the fortune teller said was true. No, that was a real seer. It was simply fascinating. Thoughts welled in her mind as Anna pounced forward with tears in her eyes and gave her fiancé a warm hug. The two of them hugged silently outside the greyish-blue house. The toy windmill turned slowly, seemingly tossing all their difficulties far away. In a rather spacious living room, Anna and Joyce were seated on different sofas, separated by Anna's parents. Joyce sighed with a satisfied expression and said, Exalted steam, I am so lucky to come back alive, to be able to see Anna again. My poor Joyce, what happened? Anna couldn't help but ask with concern. Joyce took a glance at his fiancée, and his expression turned grave. I still feel terrified to this day. I keep waking up from my dreams again and again. 5 days after the Alfalfa left Caesar Pier, we came across pirates, scary pirates. The only fortunate thing was that their leader's name was Nest. The pirate that calls himself the King of the Five Seas, Anna's father, Mr. Wayne, asked in shock. Although Joyce had already been there for half an hour, he did not volunteer details about his ordeal. He appeared to be fearful, perturbed, and uneasy. It was only after Anna returned and hugged him that he finally appeared to put it behind him. Yes, due to his declaration of being a descendant of the Solomon Empire, the King of the Five Seas, Nest didn't believe in killing captives. Hence, we were only robbed and didn't lose our lives. His subordinates even left us sufficient food, Joyce said as he recalled the ordeal. His body started to quiver, but he continued to describe his deepest and scariest nightmare. I didn't lose much of my wealth. I believed that my misfortune was over, but as we continued towards our destination, a heated conflict erupted among the Alfalfa's passengers and crew. From disagreement, to fighting, to drawing revolvers, and raising swords, to kill each other, I saw nothing but blood during that period. One after another, people beside me fell with eyes opened, never to be closed. Their limbs, hearts, and intestines were scattered across the floors. Those of us who were unwilling to turn into savage beasts, the rational group, had nowhere to hide and nowhere to escape. We were surrounded by deep blue waves and the boundless ocean. Some wailed, some begged for mercy, some sold their bodies, but their heads were hung from the mast either way. And I reeled in despair back then. I thought I would never see you again. Fortunately, in such a nightmare, there was still a hero. The captain took us to hide in the sturdy keel of the ship, and we relied on the stored water and food there until the maniacs reached their limits. Mr. Trice encouraged us, courageously leading us in an assault against those murderers. After an unforgettable bloody battle, we survived. But the Alfalfa strayed off course, and only a third of the original sailors remained. When he depicted the most horrible and darkest side of the human psyche, Joyce couldn't help but recall the hero, the man that called himself Trice. He had a round and amiable face. He was shy like a girl and enjoyed staying in a corner. Only people whom he was familiar with knew that he was a very good conversationalist. But it was such an unremarkable boy who stood in front of everyone with determination in the worst of days. Oh, exalted steam, my poor Joyce, you went through such a heart-breaking ordeal. Thank God, praise be to God, he prevented us from eternal separation. Tears welled up in Anna's eyes as she constantly dotted 3 points to form a triangle. The sacred emblem for steam and machinery. Joyce revealed a faint, pale smile. This is the reward for our faith. The Alfalfa then went through storms, lost its course, and after surmounting one challenge after another, arrived at Enmat Harbour. Due to the bloodbath that had taken place on the boat, those of us that survived were held captive by the police and questioned separately. We didn't have a chance to send telegrams home to update our loved ones. When they released us this morning, I immediately borrowed some money from my friend and took the steam locomotive back. Thank God for letting me set foot on the land of Tingen again, allowing me to see all of you again. Then, he looked towards his fiancée in confusion. Anne, when you saw me, I could feel your happiness and surprise, but I couldn't understand why you rushed towards that door so excitedly right after you got off the carriage. Hey, I had planned on giving you a huge surprise. Anna thought about what had happened earlier, and continued in disbelief. There's nothing to hide, Joyce. As I was worried about you, I went to the only divination club in Tingen City today for a divination. That fortune teller, no, the seer told me. He said, your fiancé has returned. He's in the house with a windmill. What? The Wayne couple and Joyce exclaimed simultaneously. Anna covered her face and shook her head. I can barely believe it either, but it happened. Exalted steam, perhaps there really are miracles in this world. Joyce, that seer asked me for your name, characteristics, address, and birth date. He told me he was going to do an astrolabe divination. Then, he asked me if the house with a toy windmill was yours or mine. When I confirmed it was mine, he said, congratulations, Miss Anne, Mr. Joyce Meyer is currently a guest at your place. What he needs now are not questions, but consolation and a warm hug. God, Joyce found it unbelievable and incomprehensible. Does he know me? Did someone send him a telegram? Could it be that he is familiar with the police in Enmat Harbor? No, that doesn't explain it. How did he know that I came to your place? How could he possibly know that you would seek a divination? Did you make an appointment? No, I made a selection at the last minute, Anna replied with a vacant-looking expression. Perhaps a good seer needs to be in control of vast amounts of information, even if it cannot be used any time soon. Perhaps that is the fascinating aspect of divination, Anna's father, Mr. Wainsidon, concluded. In the known history of more than 1,000 years, and in the uncertain fourth epoch, divination has existed and has yet to disappear. I think there must be a reason for that. Joyce shook his head lightly and asked, what's that seer's name? Anna thought and said, Klein Mulready. In the reception lobby of the Divination Club. As Klein had spoken softly, Angelica knew not to go close. Therefore, she only saw Anna leave as though she had lost her soul, wearing shock and confusion on her face. Angelica briskly walked to the sofa and asked out of curiosity, was the result good? She did not dare ask the actual result, afraid of violating the unspoken rule of fortune-tellers. Yeah, Klein nodded and took out 3 copper coins from his pocket. 1/8 of 1 solly is 1.5 pennies, right? Yes, Angelica looked at the copper coins and realized that one of them was a penny and 2 of them were halfpence. She quickly held it out and said, there's an additional halfpence. Klein smiled faintly and said, thank you for taking care of my customer. She gave me a tip, so it's only right I give you one. It is also to thank you for recommending me, he added in his heart. All right, Angelica felt an unknown fear of Klein, but since the reason was appropriate, she didn't refuse the offer. Klein returned to the meeting room, believing that there would be more people requesting his divinations. However, he did not receive a second customer by 40 minutes past 5. It wasn't because the Divination Club's business was poor, but because most people had already chosen a fortune-teller. They likely were recommended by others and had long determined whose services to hire. In short, I'm still lacking in reputation. Klein laughed at himself for using game terminology. He finished his 3rd cup of side black tea, grabbed his top hat and silver-edged walking stick, and walked leisurely out of the meeting room. Angelica suddenly recalled Glassis's instructions, and she quickly moved to intercept him. Mr. Mulready, when will you next visit the club? Mr. Glassis would like to thank you in person. I will come over whenever I'm free. If fate permits us, he will definitely meet me, Klein replied, using the tone of a psychic charlatan, as though he was in character. Then, he left the club before Angelica could respond and took the public carriage home. When he stepped through the door, Klein found Benson reading a newspaper and Melissa putting together bits and pieces of gears, bearings, and springs in the evening sunlight. Good afternoon. Did Mrs. Short visit? Klein asked casually. Benson didn't put down his newspaper. Instead, he lifted his head. Mrs. Short's visit lasted 15 minutes. She brought some gifts, and she was very happy with the muffins and lemon cake that we prepared. She also invited us over whenever we have the chance to. She is a friendly, well-mannered lady. She knows how to carry a conversation very well too. The only problem is their belief in the Lord of Storms. They believe that girls shouldn't go to school, but should be homeschooled instead, Melissa complained. It was obvious that she was very upset about it. Don't mind that. As long as she doesn't disturb us, she will still be a good neighbor, Klein comforted his sister, smiling. The Lowen Kingdom was a multi-religious nation. Unlike the Frozak Empire in the north, which only believed in the god of combat, or the Fenopota Kingdom in the south, which only worshipped Mother Earth. It was inevitable that the congregations from the 3 major churches of the Lord of Storms, the Evernight Goddess, and the God of Steam and Machinery had conflicts in beliefs and customs. After 1,000 years of this, they restrained each other, making coexistence possible. Okay, Melissa pursed her lips and redirected her focus onto the pile of parts again. After dinner, Klein continued revising history. Only when Melissa and Benson showered and returned to their rooms did he wash up, enter his bedroom, and lock his door. He needed to organize and summarize what he had learned and the problems that he encountered to prevent himself from forgetting or missing out any critical points. Only by doing so would he be able to respond to subsequent developments in the future with a clear train of thought. Klein flipped open his notebook, took out his pen, and started writing in Mandarin. Why is the key to digesting potions acting? After pausing for a moment, Klein continued writing. The essence to resolving the problems with potions is through digestion, not simply controlling it. This can be understood in a straightforward manner. Merely controlling it would be akin to using the power of potions as an external tool. A tamed beast, no matter how well controlled, would ultimately not be a part of a person. The risk of it turning on them would be ever present. As for digestion, it is to view the downed potion as a part of them. They can break it down, fuse with it, absorb it, and form an overall system. I am currently certain of this point. What is more important is how acting helps in digestion. According to my experience as a seer today, I can make 2 hypotheses. They can be verified in the future. 1. Acting based on the potion's name changes the state of one's body, heart, and soul, making them closer to the remnant headstrong psyche of the potion's core. This results in resonance which allows gradual assimilation and absorption. 2. The remnant headstrong psyche spirit of the magic medicine might be like a computer with complete defensive mechanisms. If one wishes to attack it and break it down, they will need to find a bug, security hole, or key. The name of the potion provides a corresponding clue. Thus, we can disguise our body, heart, and soul as part of the system through acting, and so we deceive the system's defenses. This line of thought is similar to Emperor Cell's description. No matter which guess is right, there is no escaping the body, heart, and soul, for they are the only bridge between acting and the power of potions. Klein put down his pen and looked at the paragraph of text. For a moment, he even wanted to thank the education he received from the Foodaholic Empire. No matter if he chose science or engineering for his further education, he was equipped with the basics of logical thought. Otherwise, there was no way he could have become a keyboard warrior, nor would he have been able to analyze his current situation. Acting might have an effect, but we'll have to wait and see for the specifics, Klein guessed. After that, he wrote down his second question. Why would a seer, being more well-learned and professional in the domain of mysticism, be lacking in means when it comes to direct combat? Wouldn't being more well-learned and professional make a seer even more powerful, giving them the ability to discover a way to defeat their enemies? The reasons could be. First, just like the web novels I've read in the past, I have transmigrated to a game world that has become reality. Thus, different jobs come with different specialties that have to be balanced against each other. But up to this point, there has been no sign of this world being a game, nor are there signs of mission-like developments. I'll put this reason on hold, but it's very unlikely. Second, the fundamental law of this world is balance. The Creator made this world with the core idea of balance. Third, potions at the same sequence level would have the same level of power. It is the most optimal state based on what our forefathers found out and summarized. Exceeding this level of power would make it easier for one to collapse and lose control. Below this level of power would make it such that one would not obtain the desire beyond their powers. Thus, under the situation of a balanced power level, being stronger in one area would naturally mean that one is weaker in another area. Fourth, everything in this world originated from the same source. They were formed by the remnants of the Creator. Thus, everything in this world is technically fragments of the Creator, and the fact that they have to complement each other would mean that there are inherent shortcomings to an individual. I am leaning towards the third and fourth reasons, but the latter stems from an unconfirmed myth and can only serve as a guide. Thus, I shall use the third reason as a guide, and try to ascertain it using my current knowledge and future studies. At this point, Klein had already written 2 full pages but did not stop. Instead, he penned a new question. From what I learned today, my luck enhancement ritual is categorized as a classic ritualistic magic. Similar kinds of ritualistic magic can be split into 3 parts, the first being a sacrifice that sparks the interest of a corresponding existence. The second is comprised of incantations specifically describing the existence in question. The third is using simple formatting and symbols to convey what one is asking for. Using this as a benchmark to analyze the luck enhancement ritual, there's an obvious problem. There is no third part. It has the sacrifice aspect in the placement of staple foods and walking a square in a counterclockwise manner with 4 steps. There is also a clear indication who the incantation is for, such as the phrase, blessings stem from the immortal Lord of heaven and earth. But all I did after was close my eyes and wait. There was nothing in the ritual that described the goal of enhancing my luck. In other words, the corresponding existence has no way of knowing what the so-called luck enhancement ritual is asking for, and can only do as they see fit. What a troll. Isn't the darn quintessential divination and arcane arts of the Kinnan dynasty too much of a troll? I must have had rocks in my head back then for trying. Klein stopped writing and took 2 deep breaths, trying hard to calm himself down. He spat out a foul breath and continued writing. I can consider redesigning the ritual, making it more complete. The motive of the ritual shall be to return to Earth, back to the world with my parents and friends. Then here comes the question, was the entity truly acting on a whim? Or is there a deeper meaning to it? Also, is the entity that the descriptive incantations point towards in this world the same one from Earth? If so, the difference in results between the first and second ritual could be explained as the entity doing as it wishes. But the results of me appearing above the grey fog during the second and third time, while being able to connect to justice and the hanged man has basically no differences. Why would that be so? If the fourth ritual tomorrow afternoon shows me the same stable results, that would mean that the effects are consistent. That would mean that the unknown entity has an agenda I do not know about. If that is the case, adding new descriptions and requests would not get me a clear response. In fact, it might complicate the ritual and result in adverse effects. Would the difference between the first ritual and the subsequent rituals under the premise that the entity I called upon is the same one mean that the results would be different depending on the world I'm in? It is like I am using a different interface. Then how can I design it to obtain my desired outcome? If I think that the entities behind the first and subsequent rituals are different, some of the questions can be perfectly answered. But, similarly, the stability of the results in the second and third rituals would mean that the entity I am praying to has a certain agenda, and there is no way I can change it for the time being. The most important question is the identity of the entity that the ritual is directed. Where is he, and why doesn't he give me any clues or guidance? Could he be deep in the world of fog? Can I treat him as an entity in slumber, an entity that would give fixed responses if I give him a certain stimulus, but would not interfere with what I do other than that? Then I can introduce a different ritual as a stimulus and conclude whether the feedback I receive is regular. That way, I can find the correct method of returning. But the problem lies in the possibility that he is not asleep. In that case, such tests might result in terrifying outcomes. It might be really dangerous. The first attempt must be conducted with extreme caution. The design must not anger the being. What a headache. I need more knowledge. Klein sighed and gave a summary. Finally, he wrote down other miscellaneous items. They are always formless voices resonating in my ears, shouting Hornus and was it saying Fria or Fakria? Hornus is the mountain range dividing the Lowen Kingdom and the Intis Republic. Its main peak is 6,000 meters above sea level. According to the records in the Antigonus family's diary, there existed a nation of the Evernite in the 4th epoch. Is the nation of the Evernite related to the Evernite goddess? Is there any connection between the two? Are they allies or enemies? Was the Antigonus family obliterated by the Church of the Evernight Goddess due to nation of the Evernight? Did I hear murmurings coming from the diary, from the howls of the Antigonus family over 1 or 2,000 years? What then does Fligria mean? An interesting question. To be able to leave behind such a diary, to leave behind sealed artifact 2-049 implies that the Antigonus family had possession of a relatively powerful beyond their power. If that is so, which sequence did they possess? Was it complete or not complete? My realization that the diary is in the hands of Ray Bieber was a bit of a coincidence, but without any indication of it being arranged, could my fate really be tied up with that diary's? His ideas were penned on the pieces of paper. Klein tried his best to write down the events he had experienced and his guesses about their meaning. He wrote a total of 4 pages on both sides of each paper. Rip. Klein suddenly tore off the 4 pages and read them from top to bottom, sometimes marking certain sections with his pen, adding a few sentences at other times. Time flew quickly. The crimson moon was temporarily covered by dark clouds. Klein picked up the pocket watch on the table, snapped it open, and looked at the time. He put down the watch and took out a box of matches from his drawer. He lit one and brought it close to the 4 pages of notes. The orange flame ignited the edges of the paper and quickly spread. Klein placed the notes on top of the wooden dustbin and watched the ashes drop. He then released his fingers, allowing the papers to fall. In just 10 seconds, everything had disappeared. All that was left was the still swirling ash and the charred bottom of the dustbin. As there was Emperor Cell's secret diary in this world, Klein did not dare leave behind any evidence that he knew how to write Chinese. If old Neil and the rest discovered the 4 pieces of paper he wrote, he would have no idea how to explain the matter. And while writing the confidential questions, Klein was worried that the one paying attention to his dreams would be able to see and decipher the contents no matter which language he used, be it Loan, Ancient Fisak, or Hermes. Therefore, he could only write notes in Chinese to organize and summarize. After he was done with the task, he burned the notes to leave no traces. And precisely because there was no way of saving, he set up a plan for himself. He would do this summary once a week just in case he forgot anything. As he watched the ashes fall, Klein pulled out a white piece of paper. He wrote the title, "To my respected mentor." He wanted to write to Senior Associate Professor Quentin Cohen, asking if he had any relevant historical information about the main peak of the Hornus Ice Mountain Range. The next day, a Monday morning, Klein, who had a day off, didn't leave home. Instead, he gave Melissa his letter directed to Mentor Cohen Quentin and more than enough money to buy stamps. He entrusted her with the job of mailing the letter at the post office near the Tingen Technical School where she studied. After breakfast, he slept in to make up for the lack of sleep caused by the previous night's work. He only woke up because of his stomach's grumblings close to noon. He heated up some leftovers from the night before and ate them with a loaf of rye bread. Klein grabbed a newspaper and entered the bathroom on the 2nd floor. Whenever he did that, he couldn't help but sigh at the lack of a cell phone. After about 7 or 8 minutes, he left the toilet refreshed and washed his hands. He then returned to his bedroom and locked his door. Klein drew the curtains, lit up the gas lamp, and cogitated for half an hour. After practicing his spiritual vision, spirit dowsing, and dowsing rod for half an hour, he spent another hour mentally reviewing the mysticism knowledge he had gained recently. After doing that, he ripped up the old newspaper and crumpled them into a few balls. He wrote on them, "Moonflower Candle, Full Moon Essence Oil," and other names of materials. He followed the prescribed steps of ritualistic magic in his head in order to master every little detail. Until he was entirely familiar with it, he didn't intend to try ritualistic magic because it was both a waste of materials and also easily attracted danger. He repeated again and again until he picked up his silver pocket watch patterned with vine leaves and took a glance. He realized that it was 2:45. He considered for a few seconds and brought the scraps of old newspapers to the kitchen on the 1st floor to burn them. While doing so, he made sure he was in an optimal state of mind as he prepared for the tarot gathering. Locking his bedroom door once again, Klein didn't wait for the clock to strike 3. He planned to enter the area above the grey fog ahead of time. He wanted to seize the chance to explore the place thoroughly. As Klein stood in an empty spot in his room and started walking counterclockwise, he suddenly worried that Justice and the Hanged Man had yet to enter a suitable environment. He thought of a particular matter. Would they be disturbed or discovered? He had previously mentioned to allow Justice and the Hanged Man to apply for leave ahead of time if they needed to be absent from the gathering for some reason, such as being unable to find time alone or unexpected circumstances. It would have been an almost unsolvable problem for Klein in the past. There was no way he could build an entire server-based internet by hand in a different world, right? Any technology beyond the telegram could expose him. But now, he had suddenly found inspiration from ritualistic magic. Ritualistic magic borrows the powers of others by seeking the help of different existences. Similar incantations would make it clear who it is directed to in the beginning, such as the Evernight Goddess or the Lady of Crimson. It would be a description of the unknown and clandestine existences. Then, can I amend the chant and redirect the beginning of the chant towards myself? Directed at me. This way, even if Justice and the Hanged Man conduct the ritual in different locations, I would receive their messages. Klein suddenly felt fresh insight as he began analyzing the likelihood of the method working. There are 2 difficulties. First, I am not an incredibly strong high-level sequencer. Even if the description of the incantation was directed to me, I couldn't possibly receive the request. Second, how can I ensure that the description of the chant is directed at me accurately, and doesn't stray away and hit some other unknown existence that fits the description? That would be incredibly dangerous. Klein paced back and forth, deep in thought for a possible workable solution. He went in circles with silent footsteps. Then, he naturally linked the matter with the mysterious world of the grey fog. Even if I can't receive the message, that doesn't mean the grey fog can't. Its connection with the crimson stars can drag a person into the space directly, regardless of where they are in the physical world. I could consider tying myself to the mysterious space together during the directed description. In accordance with this train of thought, even though I might not immediately receive the request when the other party is holding the ritual, I will still be able to see the corresponding messages whenever I enter the grey fog. To put it simply, it is the difference between being online and offline on an instant messaging system. Klein became more excited the more he thought. He felt that his idea was worth a try. What kind of description could be used to precisely direct a message to me into the grey fog world? He started thinking about the actual details. In fact, he had an incantation that would definitely work. It was none other than the Loan translation of "Blessings stem from the celestial worthy of heaven and earth." But herein lies the problem. He would lose control of the grey fog and lose his leading role. He could only exclude it. Fool from an alternate world. No way. It is quite accurate, and there is almost no other existence that fits the criteria, but it would expose my biggest secret. Klein thought of one incantation after another. But he crossed off each one. After about 7 to 8 minutes, he finally decided on the description of the first paragraph that directed to him. The fool that doesn't belong to this era. It was obviously not accurate enough. Therefore, Klein quickly added, "The mysterious ruler above the grey fog." The combination of the two lines practically limited it to him. Furthermore, he had tied the grey fog to him. It's still a little short. I cannot eliminate the possibility that there are multiple spaces and rulers above the grey fog. I cannot eliminate the fact that the description might be directed to the spirit world. Klein creased his eyebrows and planned on making it more certain. He thought for a full minute and finally decided on the last part of the description. The king of yellow and black who wields good luck. It shared a similar meaning to "Blessings stem from the exalted teach of heaven and earth one." If the incantation purely depended on that part of the description, it might end up being directed away and provoking unknown dangerous existences. But with the first two lines as a limitation, and his experience of arriving above the fog through a similar incantation, he believed that the target's description could result in a perfect lock-on. Klein wasn't sure if casting the ritualistic magic with those 3 descriptions would be effective, but he was definite that it would not attract the attention of another existence. It wouldn't throw Justice and the Hanged Man into danger. Klein heaved out a long sigh and recited the incantation that he had decided upon. "The fool that doesn't belong to this era. You are the mysterious ruler above the grey fog. You are the king of yellow and black who wields good luck." He nodded his head slightly and took out his pocket watch to confirm the time. "It's already 2:58. Without further thought, Klein put away his pocket and entered cogitation. Soon he chanted and took 4 steps counterclockwise to form a square. The most ferocious noises and heart-stirring roars were heard once again. He felt the headache that was even harder to deal with than the pain of consuming the seer potion. The pain was not the sharp pain that tore through his head. It was a throbbing pain that made him manic and irrational. It was a pain that left him in chaotic confusion. Klein controlled himself using cogitation and tried hard to ignore the voices. The muttering and murmurs receded like the tides. His body became ethereal, along with his spirituality. Everything seemed to float. The boundless grey fog appeared before his sight, the crimson stars at varying distances from him, just like pairs of eyes. Above the grey fog stood the palace, lofty and towering like the home of a giant. It was as though it had been there for millions of years. All Klein did was will it and he disappeared from where he was, reappearing at the seat of honor at the long bronze table with 22 high-backed chairs. "The effect of the ritual is definitely fixed," Klein muttered. He tapped his glabella gently and allowed the fog to engulf him, once thicker than before. According to the description of the Hanged Man, if Justice had become a spectator, it would be best not to reveal any of his tricks before her. Without any time for exploring, Klein extended his right hand and formed an invisible connection, connecting him to the 2 familiar crimson stars. On the roaring blue waves of the Sonia Sea, an ancient sailboat was sailing with the wind. Alger Wilson locked himself in the captain's cabin and made Ghost Ship provide him the best protection. He opened the pocket watch before him and laid it next to the brass sextant. The clock was ticking without joy as it exuded nervousness. When the hour hand, minute hand, and second hand aligned, there was an explosion of crimson before Alger Wilson. It ignored the layers and layers of protection he had placed over himself. His sigh reverberated across the captain's room. Backland, Empress Barra. Audrey Hall laid against a down feather pillow and glanced at the yellow paper in her hand. Her gem-like eyes looked like they had 2 souls spiraling slowly in them. Her gaze was calm and cool, as if she were waiting for a play to begin. As the crimson red erupted, she looked at herself being swallowed with complete detachment. Above the grey fog, in the magnificent palace, on the ancient and mottled long bronze table, Klein, who had already activated his spiritual vision, looked over when Audrey Hall's figure began to form. He was not surprised to see that the colors deep in her aura had blended together. It became pure and serene, like a lake that was clear and reflective. She really did become a beyond. Klein was just about to move his gaze away when he suddenly saw the chair belonging to Miss Justice change. The bright stars on the back of the chair moved swiftly, forming an illusory constellation that didn't belong to reality. That constellation was familiar to Klein because it was one of the symbols of mysticism. It was a symbol that represented Giant Dragon. Spectator Giant Dragon. Klein restrained himself from shaking his head and looked over at the back of the Hanged Man's chair. Typically speaking, it was impossible for him to see the back of the chair from his angle, but this was where he was in control. Everything presented itself according to his will. The constellation on the back of the chair had not changed, but since Klein had grasped the basics of mysticism, he wasn't as ignorant as before. He could recognize that it was the symbol of Windstorm. Sailor Keeper of the Sea Windstorm, that's reasonable. The color deep in the Hanged Man's aura is much purer than it was as he leveled up. Oh yeah, what about the symbol behind my chair? Klein suppressed his impulse to look, rapped the edge of the long table thrice just like before, and smiled as he said, "Congratulations, Miss Justice, you are a Beyonder now." He can tell straight away. Audrey was stunned and smiled faintly. "Thank you, Mr. Fool, and thank you, Mr. Hanged Man." "That was much faster than I thought," Alger Wilson said honestly. Klein didn't continue the topic, but tapped his glabella and said with a smile, "Lady, sir, have either of you found Grossel's diary? In Chinese, yellow refers to earth, and black refers to heaven." Upon hearing the fool's question, Audrey did not immediately answer like in the past. Instead, she widened her crystalline eyes and glanced at the Hanged Man with a scrutinous attitude. Alger subconsciously subdued his body emotions. After a few seconds of silence, he said, "I found 2 pages of the Emperor Grossel's diary and have memorized their contents." "I have 1 page," Audrey, whose vision was obscured by the fog, said as though she was removed from the conversation. "Pretty good." Klein did not allow his joy or his disappointment to be noticed from his voice. He felt joy as there were 3 full pages, but disappointment also because there were only 3 pages. Their initial search for the diary was definitely easier, for all they had to do was ask through their connections and channels they were already familiar with. Collecting the pages would become more and more difficult as time went on, as it would involve more and more elements. "Should we express them now?" Audrey inquired with a calm tone. "Yes," Klein simply nodded. He maintained his posture without any change. He had to be cautious in front of a spectator. As he finished his sentence, pieces of yellowish-brown goatskin parchment and dark red fountain pens appeared in front of Audrey and Alger. The 2 of them picked up their pens and started to recall the symbols they had seen. They also infused the emotions of expressing them out. Silently, lines of text appeared on the goatskin. Some of them appeared proper, some delicate, others slanted. In a mere minute, the contents that Alger and Audrey had forcibly memorized were all written. Klein wheeled the 3 pieces of parchment into his hands. He gave the pages a cursory glance and realized that some of the grammar was wrong. There were also missing and wrong words in the content. But experimentation had proved that incorrect sequencing of words to some extent did not affect the overall comprehension of Chinese. Klein was also not afraid of missing words, since he often read web novels filled with censored asterisks. The 8th of April, I stood at the bow of Black King and stretched my arms, saying to Grimm and Edwards, "My fortune is yours for the taking, but you'll have to find it first." I left everything I own at the ends of the fog sea. They did not understand my humor at all and even asked if I really had other treasures. How boring. You can't be my 4 horsemen of the apocalypse if you keep at that. April the 11th, I discovered a nameless island that was not on a safe sea route. There are a good number of extraordinary animals there. No, I prefer calling them extraordinary beings. It feels more impressive that way. Other than that, there are several weird creatures on the island. I believe that if Darwin had been transmigrated there is no way he could have written his theory of evolution. April the 15th, Grimm has suddenly become a little odd. Has he been infected by something? When did the Emperor Grossel, who was born in the Intis Kingdom, set off on a voyage? The Fog Sea should be the sea west of the Intis Republic. I need to use historical information from the library to cross-reference this. Klein quickly finished reading a page, casting his gaze to the back of the piece of paper. At this point, he no longer hid the fact that he could decipher Emperor Grossel's secret symbols, since this ability fitted the persona and status of the fool. Audrey and Alger did not speak. They waited silently, as if unsurprised by such a revelation. In fact, they even believed that it was only right. October the 2nd, they actually wanted me to marry Matilda from the Abel family without even consulting me first. Heavens, I had not even met her. No, I must decline. Even if I were to run away from home and survive on my own and suffer the vicissitudes of life, I must fight against this marriage. October the 5th, Miss Matilda is really pretty. October the 6th, her personality and her demeanor is just my type. I am starting to look forward to the marriage. Hey, Emperor, where is your integrity? Klein leaned back into his seat, not allowing his emotions to pass through the fog. He realized that Gustave did not write in his diary every day early on. Most of the time, he would only write in the diary when there were certain events that he needed to lampoon, record, or to vent his emotions. He shifted his gaze downward. Klein looked at the last sentence of this page. October the 9th, they actually called me the son of the steam. I like that very much. Klein was a little disappointed that the information in the first 2 pages was of little value. But he did not turn sullen. He moved the 3rd page to the top. This page had content written on both sides of the paper. May the 21st, the Church of the God of Craftsmanship gave me 2 choices, 2 beginning sequence pathways. One of them is the Savant. It is a complete sequence pathway they possess. The other is Mystery Prior, which they obtained from the Moses Ascetic Order, but it lacks the higher sequences. May the 22nd, my choice was easy, Savant. The Savant is a complete sequence pathway. Although wielding more information on mysticism can aid my return home, the problem is that if I'm not strong enough, there is a need to acquire external help for transmigration. And I do not know if this external entity would be good or bad, benevolent or malicious. I cannot control it, and thus it could be very dangerous. In that case, why not strengthen myself and return by relying on my own powers? Thus, the complete sequence was the most important factor in my considerations. May the 23rd, I have become a savant. With the power of the potion, I actually recalled all the knowledge I had learned in the past, such as physics, chemistry, etc. I have not only recalled the knowledge, but I understand it more deeply, as well as its possible applications and implications. Ha ha, this is a job specially tailored for a transmigrate like me from an alternate realm. I will be able to express my advantage to the greatest extent. I have to say that if I were to return in my present state to the third year of high school, I would definitely become top scholar. If I could further specialize in an area, it wouldn't even be too hard for me to become a scientist. May the 26th. I am enjoying my status as a savant. Something odd worth mentioning. When I address myself as a savant, doing things that are in line with this role, the murmurings that drive me crazy become considerably softer. I have also been able to control my occasional temper outbursts. I have also recalled the matter regarding the diary. Is this the acting that the mysterious Mr. Sir Raphael mentioned? This could be key in resolving the side effects posed by potions. As Klein read the diary page, he had a deep realization that there was a fundamental difference between how he and the Emperor Cell did things. For example, regarding the matter of returning home, Klein considered grasping in-depth knowledge of mysticism to avoid risks and accomplish his goal, while Emperor Cell preferred to rely on himself and face the risk. I have to say, I envy people like that sometimes. Perhaps everyone yearns for something they do not possess, of course. I also have to consider strengthening myself. Both of these are important, Klein thought, sighing a little. The description provided by Emperor Cell about acting instilled Klein with confidence that the conclusion he made about acting yesterday was more or less correct. He put the 3 diary pages down, looked up at Justice and the Hanged Man. He smiled and said, "My apologies, I was too absorbed in reading them." Audrey calmed the envy in her heart and smiled faintly. "I can understand. I hope to one day be able to exchange information about the diary's contents. That will require a price." Klein smiled and glanced at Justice, then swept his gaze towards the silent Hanged Man. Audrey put her palms together and placed them in front of her. "Mr. Fool, Mr. Hanged Man, I have 3 questions to ask. If you think that the answers warrant a high price, tell me what you want. I will try my best to seek it." "No problem," Alger answered succinctly. Klein nodded and leaned back further, making himself comfortable. Audrey thought for a few seconds and said, "The first question is, what does acting really mean? I realize that the remnant psyche in the potion has minute effects on me. Is that because I've been acting as a spectator all this while?" Alger did not speak. Instead, he looked at the fool, as though waiting for him to give an answer. Klein rubbed his finger on the edge of the table and said in a relaxed tone, "Let me explain this with an analogy. Imagine the core powers of your potion as a tightly guarded castle. The remnants of the psyche that can cause a lashback resides within that castle. Our goal is to get rid of it and become the true master of the castle. There are 2 ways we can do that. The first is to forcefully invade the castle. There is no guarantee that this will work, and you will most definitely injure yourself unless you can suppress it with absolute power. But of course, we are not equipped to do that. The second way is to get the owner of the castle to extend an invitation. This invitation can allow us to slide through the scrutiny of the guards and infiltrate the castle. We can then easily finish off the enemies. But the problem lies in the fact that this invitation specifies the facial features and characteristics of the guest. Thus, we have to disguise ourselves and act as the guest. Do you understand?" Alger immediately asked, as if he had anticipated this reply, "Then the aforementioned invitation is the name of the potion's sequence?" "That's right," Klein answered with great affirmation. Audrey froze for a moment, having the sudden feeling that she completely understood what acting meant. She immediately exited her spectator state due to her excitement. She praised in joy, "What an exceptional method. I think it fits your title. Its style is very compatible with the fool. I would never have believed that acting would have such an effect. Luckily, I have been acting as a spectator the past few days." She paused for a moment before saying, "I think that this is a very valuable answer. My heart is not at ease accepting it for nothing. Mr. Fool, what do you need in exchange?" "Of course, I still remember that I owe you a page of Emperor Rassel's diary." "More pages of Rassel's diary," or Klein paused for a moment. He had wanted to get information about the sequence regarding the seer, but felt that such a low-level request would ruin the mystical image of the fool. Thus, he chose to give up on it and planned to ask them discreetly some other day. "I just advanced recently and have yet to completely digest the seer potion," he consoled himself and added on without expression, "anything regarding the Antigonus family, even if I'm already aware of them myself." Alger remained silent for a few seconds. He looked at the top of the long bronze table for a moment before slowly opening his mouth. "Mr. Fool, I believe I can pay you back immediately with the information you requested just now. No problem." Klein tried to maintain his unchanging deep tone. He rested his left elbow on the armrest of his chair and supported his forehead slightly with his fingers, posing as though he was listening calmly. Alger deliberated over his words and said, "The Antigonus is an ancient family. Their history can be traced back to the Cataclysm epoch before the 4th epoch and is related to the second blasphemy slate." "The second blasphemy slate? There's a second blasphemy slate? How many are there?" Klein's pupils shrank, and he nearly changed his posture. According to what the Hanged Man and Justice have said previously, the blasphemy slate contained the profound mysteries of the 22 paths of the divine. There are 2 of such important items, or even more. 22 paths of the divine sequences, and pathways. Could these 2 nouns mean the same thing? Every complete sequence pathway leads straight to the throne of the divine. At that instant, the description of the second blasphemy slate gave Klein numerous thoughts. He believed that if not for the thick greyish-white fog concealing him, his emotional reaction would probably have been discovered by Miss Spectator. As for the words Cataclysm epoch, he was no stranger to that term as a historian. It was the name of the 3rd epoch. After his recent revision, Klein even knew that the 3rd epoch was separated into 2 eras, the Glorious Era and the Cataclysm Era. A second blasphemy slate. Audrey plainly revealed her ignorance on the matter. Before she calmed her emotions, she returned to her spectator state. Nice question. Klein secretly cheered for Miss Justice. It was a question inconvenient for him to ask as the fool. Alger stole a glance at the fool and noticed that his posture remained the same, nor did he make a sound. Hence, he thought and answered, the first blasphemy slate appeared in the Dark Epoch, which is the second epoch where we humans struggled to survive under the protection of gods. The second blasphemy slate appeared at the end of the third epoch. It could even be said that its appearance symbolized the end of the Cataclysm epoch. The content of the two blasphemy slates is kept secret by the 7 major churches. I only know bits and pieces of it. I only know that they involve the pathways to godhood, but I am not sure of the differences between them. Was the blasphemy slate that Emperor Self saw the first or the second? Audrey asked curiously. Upon hearing that, Klein recalled what Alger said about the potion names during the first gathering. He said that the names of the sequence potions were derived from the blasphemy slate. Similarly, Captain had also mentioned that the formation and completion of the potion system was thanks to the birth of the blasphemy slate that indirectly confirms that the pathways to godhood are the sequence pathway. Klein answered his earlier question silently. Then Alger simply replied, the second one. The glint in Audrey's eyes diminished and she returned to her spectator state. She did not continue asking questions. Instead, all she did was focus her gaze on the hanged man. It was obvious that her scrutiny made Alger uncomfortable, but he suppressed the emotions within him. He lowered his voice and continued, during the Solomon dynasty in the 4th epoch, although the Antigonus family was considered an illustrious part of the aristocracy, they didn't do anything very memorable until they supported the establishment of the Tudor Empire. They then stood right in the middle of the stage of northern continent. In that period, Antigonus, Ammon, Abraham, Jacob, and others were illustrious names of the human kingdom. However, after the War of the 4 Sovereigns, the blood emperor from the Tudor Empire perished. They fell from the top of their pedestal and are now hunted by the 7 gods. I am not sure about the actual process, but I do know that the Antigonus family was destroyed at the hands of the Church of the Evernight Goddess. Mr. Fool, if you'd like to know more, I am afraid that you can only obtain the information from the Church of the Evernight Goddess or from the few ancient secret organizations. You know which few I am referring to. I don't. Klein nodded while feeling bitter inside. Okay. The secret order is 1. Captain and old Neil mentioned the Moses ascetic order. I wonder if the psychology alchemists count. While he mentally checked off the candidates, Alger provided him with the last bits of information. I similarly have no idea which sequence pathways the Antigonus family held. There are only 2 adjectives that appear repetitively in the descriptions of the Antigonus family, and those are strange and terrifying. Strange and terrifying, thinking back to the notebook, the original Klein and his classmates, and what happened to Ray Bieber's mother. It really is aptly worded. Klein continuously rapped the edge of the long table with the tip of his finger a couple of times. Then, he slowly began to speak. Very well, I am satisfied with the payment. The reason he continuously rapped the long table lightly with his fingers was to emphasize the action. To make Justice and the hanged man believe that he had a habit of rapping in order to conceal the fact that the same motion was used to activate and deactivate his spirit vision. It's my pleasure. Alger did not say anything else. Audrey took a look at the hanged man and then the fool. She smiled faintly and said, then, I shall ask the second question. What is the name of the subsequent potion for Spectator? Where can I find the clues? I'd also like to ask so straightforwardly, but different choices lead to different difficulties. Klein did not speak but cast his gaze towards the hanged man. Alger remained silent for a few seconds before saying, I'll answer the question for free, because I led you on this pathway. The subsequent sequence for Spectator is sequence 8 telepathic. The ancient name of sequence 7 is psychianalyst, but he's called psychiatrist now. This is what I found out from a member of the psychology alchemists. I think they should have quite a number of potion formulas for this pathway. Psychology alchemist spirit medium Dally was rather approving of their theory, but Captain thought of them as evil and crazy. Klein listened while in deep thought. Do you know the whereabouts of that particular psychology alchemist's member? Asked Audrey as her eyes beamed with joy. Be it telepathic or psychiatrist, both names appealed to her aesthetics. Alger gave a rare laugh. I do. He's immersed in the seas around Sonia Island. I sank him with my own hands. If you would like to look for the psychology alchemists, I have to apologize since I severed the clues. He was not worried that Justice would find his identity through his description, because he did that on his own, out of the public eye. Sand, Audrey was at a loss how to reply or what expression to wear. She drew a deep breath and suddenly failed to maintain her spectator state. She asked bashfully, the third question. If, and I'm saying if a normal animal were to drink a sequence 9 potion, what would happen? What kind of a question is that? Klein tapped his blue unnoticeably with his finger that was supporting his forehead. Very quickly, he saw the changes in color and noticed that Audrey's emotions had turned frantic, nervous, and a little ashamed. Could she have done something that stupid? Klein was astounded, but didn't find it strange. After the past 2 gatherings, he was certain that Miss Justice was quite an airhead. The hanged man, Alger, was obviously dumbfounded as well. He took a while to reply. Normal animals do not have the brains of humans. They wouldn't be able to learn cogitation in a timely manner. Therefore, it would most likely lead to immediate death or a breakdown into a monster. However, if they survive the initial ingestion of the potion, they should become an extraordinary creature. If the potion has the ability to enhance their intelligence, they can even become smarter. All right. Audrey breathed out a silent sigh and nodded while saying with a relaxed tone. I have no other questions. Alger considered for a moment and did not mention matters regarding the Aurora order or the listener. Similarly, he shook his head and said, nor do I. I have something. Klein didn't change his posture but said with a smile, it will require your cooperation. He had yet to turn off his spirit vision, and he immediately saw that the hanged man was showing signs of nervousness, while Miss Justice was too simple-minded to show fear or carefulness. Before they could reply, Klein comforted them, don't worry. It's trivial. If it succeeds, it will be beneficial to you, so I wouldn't be paying extra remuneration. Go ahead. Audrey instinctively entered the spectator state, but she couldn't see through the thick grey fog engulfing the fool. As you will, Alger replied, steadying himself. Klein moved his fingers and smiled when he said, previously, I said that we would do some experiments to enable you to ask for a leave of absence. That way, you do not have to worry if you have to be somewhere inappropriate on a Monday afternoon. That's our wish. Audrey loosened her tightly knitted eyebrows. Alger thought and said, what do you need us to do? You could try a piece of ritualistic magic during your free time. It need not be too formal, as long as you are in an environment that won't be disturbed. Put 4 brand new candles on an altar, placed on 4 corners respectively. It's best if they are candles with the sandalwood scent. Put a loaf of white bread near the candle on the top left corner, a bowl of fenapota noodles near the candle on the top right corner, pepper by the candle on the bottom left corner. And the dessert pie by the candle on the bottom right corner. Use a silver knife to make a sealed spiritual environment. Klein described his modified version of the luck enhancement ritual and taught Miss Justice how to create a spiritual environment for free. To be frank, as the ritual was targeted at himself, Klein believed that the former part, which was intended to attract the interest of an entity, could be omitted completely. However, he still worked hard to make the procedure seem important. Of course, it didn't comply with what old Neil taught about gods being second and oneself being third. Mix moon flowers, gold mint, slumber flowers, fingered citron, and rock rose together, then distill it. Extract it for its essential oil, then pour a drop onto each candle. Audrey listened with piqued interest as she recorded all that he said. When he was done, she asked, what about the incantation? Mr. Fool, what's the corresponding incantation? Alger stopped writing with the fountain pen in his hand as well. He turned his head to look at the fool. Klein, who was immersed in the grey fog, tapped the edge of the long table with his finger lightly and said calmly and monotonously in Hermes, the fool that doesn't belong to this era. You are the mysterious ruler above the grey fog. You are the king of yellow and black who wields good luck.